Have you ever felt like you were being surrounded by an enemy? Or maybe being overcome by some force in this world where you have no recourse, no place to turn for help? Good morning. This is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Wednesday. You know, we can read about many examples of God's deliverance for his people in the Bible, in some historical journals where they were desperately afraid before God showed up. Maybe that's where you are today. At your wit's end, you're desperately afraid of the future. Well, in Exodus chapter 14, God had used Moses to get his people out of Egypt and to leave behind their bondage, their slave labor, all the oppression of the Pharaoh of Egypt. God had actually used 10 different plagues to get Pharaoh's attention. But unfortunately, each time he changed his mind after the plague was over and refused to let God's people go from his hand of tyranny. Finally, they released them to leave Egypt, and God did something strange in this picture. In the heart of Pharaoh, the Bible says he hardened his heart. He decided he would not let these slaves go free after all. You see, God did this, the Bible says, in order to gain honor over Pharaoh and his world-renowned great army. In Exodus 14:4, it says that. So when the army of Pharaoh, with his 600 chariots and his captains, came out after the Israelites, they cried to Moses with such a lack of faith in God. They said, "Did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? I mean, didn't we say, just leave us alone back in Egypt and we would rather be their slaves than to die out here alone?" So Moses, at God's command, of course, said these words in Exodus 14 and verse 13. "Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you will see them no more again forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace." Have we ever received that word from the Lord? Don't be afraid. Or in the New Testament, oftentimes it says, "Let not your heart be troubled." And those phrases oftentimes came in perilous times, perhaps whenever an angel would appear to someone and scare them to death. Or perhaps when Jesus was ready to leave his disciples in John chapter 14. Let not your heart be troubled. He also told Joshua to not be afraid, even though he was going in to conquer the Canaanites and overtake the promised land with giants and walled cities. When we learn that we don't have to be afraid when we place our trust in God. You see, Moses' command was stand still and see the salvation of the Lord today. In other words, don't run in some dangerous directions. Just trust in God. Just watch what he can do. I don't know Moses had all the answers yet. I don't know that God had revealed all this, but he did know enough to trust in God in the midst of a crisis. He also threw in this phrase, "These Egyptians whom you see today, you will see no more again forever." So instead of fretting or fighting, let God fight for you, and you will hold your peace. Of course, we know the rest of the story, right, in Exodus 14, where God parted the waters of the Red Sea and allowed his people to escape on this dry land because the winds had blown and held back the waters. Then, when Pharaoh's army decided to chase after them, he released those waters on Pharaoh's army. The Bible says his great chariots began to bog down in the mud. The wheels began to fall off of them. And his great army, who was known as all-powerful in this world, was drowned in the midst of the Red Sea. So God got the victory. And his people were a part of it. So God says to us today, do not fear, but in the midst of crisis or those desperate situations, stand still and see how I will deliver you. I will fight for you. Wouldn't it be great to just sit by as a spectator? You know, maybe grab you a bag of popcorn. This is going to be good because God's going to do something miraculous to deliver us.